Hello, welcome back. I hope you're doing very well. A few months ago, I made a community post on YouTube asking viewers if they could suggest any subjects that they'd like covered in videos. And by far the most popular was moving a project from Ableton Live into the Akai Force. Now, I've held off making that video for quite a while for the simple reason that I've never done that. I've moved projects from the Force to Ableton, but never the other way around before. So what I thought I'd do is create a small project on Ableton Live, which is what we're looking at on the other bit of the screen, and then move it across to the Force and document that process. If there are any issues I kind of come up against, we will then document trying to fix them as well, or if it works, it works. But with that in mind, I've obviously been sort of following threads on Facebook groups and things like that. So I know some of the issues that people have experienced in the past doing this. The primary one seems to be warping. So in this project I've created, I've got no warped files because that seems to be one of the main issues moving something from Ableton to the Force. So anything in this project that needed to be warped, I've resampled it at its kind of warped tempo so that its native tempo is now what I want it to be. Because as I understand it, moving warped audio from Ableton into the Force doesn't work. So with that in mind, let's have a quick look at this project here. I apologise if you pick up the noise of my mouse through the microphone. So this is just the mic. I'm recording my voice. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks here. And I've picked what these are quite sort of carefully to see how the Force responds to them all. So if we look at this first one here, it's a melodic sample, a piano sample that's been chopped up and turned into a kit. And if we scroll across here, you'll see we've got quite a lot of effects on here. And what I'm looking for here is, as I understand it, the Force should recreate this as a drum program, no problem. But I'm wondering if it's going to try and add effects to sort of mirror what we've got going on here, or if it just ignores that completely. If it does ignore them completely, I've picked things that we should be able to replicate in the Force. So we've got a cab sim for an amplifier. We've got some saturation here. We've got a delay. This thing here is a granular delay and a compressor and an EQ. So if Force doesn't try and do anything to this, we should at least be able to replicate it. And then here we've got a very simple, just a chopped up drum texture. There's nothing interesting going on there. And then these two are both pads that I've made with OpX4, the VST version of it. So what I'm looking for here is I want to know whether, first of all, Force will recognize that these are OpX4 sort of patches, if you like. And both of these patches are presets that I've tweaked. So I want to see if Force recognizes that and if it also carries the tweaks I've made to the patches over as well. And then we've got a chopped up drum break here. Again, same sort of thing. It's got some effects on it, so we will find out whether Force tries to sort of mirror that or adapt to that. I also want to see how it expresses things like this. So basically the two OpX4 synths that we've got, sorry, my brain just fell out of my ear then for some reason, are in a group, and we know that Force can't do groups, so I want to see how it kind of expresses that. Then we've got bass here, which is just a little bass pattern, but it's done on Live's analog built-in synth. So I want to see if I can replicate the sound of that with something in the Force. And then we've got pigments here, which is playing like a sort of an evolving pad. And I was thinking that a hype synth instance might be good for that. So basically what we're going to try and do is move this across, see how that works, if it works, how it expresses or how Force expresses all of these things that we've got here, and then see if we can get it sounding roughly the same. So to that end, let's just play you it so you can hear what it sounds like. Here we go. So we've got the bass coming now. this is the pigment sound we're going to try and replicate. So this is the sort of main thrust of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop. No, I'm not going to stop that. I'm going to stop that. Because if I press stop up there, it will stop my mic recording. So what we're going to do now is click on File, and we want to go down to Collect All and Save. So what this is going to do is, instead of just saving the project as an Ableton ALS file and having all the samples and things separately, it's going to gather all of the samples together and put it in one package, which is the thing we need to move over to the Force. So when we click on that, it gives us some other options. It says, do we want files from elsewhere, meaning outside of Ableton? From other projects, I haven't got anything from other projects, but yes. From user library, yes. And from factory pack. So in other words, you want all of these switched on in case it needs to pull things from other places. So I'm going to click OK. Saving is not okay. Well, you can see what's going on there because I've got the recording going from my microphone. It's not letting me done it. So I'll stop recording. I will save this properly, and I'm going to move it all onto a hard drive and chuck it on the Force, and we'll come back and see how that all works. Hello, welcome back. We're on the Force. I've got that project saved on a SSD drive, an external one, plugged into Force. Can you see my hands? Yes, you can. So what we're going to do is hit load. Go to Places, and here we are. MP Samples is the name of the drive. Force Live Transfer is the project. And we want Push Roo ALS, which is just the name I gave it when I was working on it. So, Bosh, here we go. So we had 7 tracks before, and I can see we've got 7 tracks now. Let's put the knobs into volume mode. I like that because it says the names of the tracks here. And we can delete that mic track, which we don't need anymore. So first thing I want to, in fact, I can see this hasn't worked the way I want it to. So if you remember, these 2 tracks here were both OpX4 plugins, which I created on the VST. And if we look at them, look at the icon in the track header, we can see that these are MIDI tracks. They're not plugin tracks. So it hasn't, if I just go edit, and then the track, you can see that it hasn't carried over. That's really disappointing. I thought that was going to work, to be honest. I thought it would know that I'd used one of the Air plugins and have assigned that to that track. So that's disappointing. So what we would need to do is create 2 tracks with OpX4 on them. Copy the copy the clips over to them. So that's one thing we need to do to get this working. If we have a look at this track here, this was our chopped up piano. So let's just go edit and note. Yeah, that's worked. I'm just going to turn my master channel down a bit because so we've got the clips, or sorry, the slices that we made, but we've got some clicks at the beginning and the end. And I think that's because Ableton Live automatically, when you create slices, or indeed any audio kind of clip or file on Ableton Live, it just puts a tiny little fade at the beginning and the end. So we're going to need to fix that as well. Drums, this was the drum texture. Yeah, we've got clicks on that as well. Our 2 pads don't work. This is our main drum line. Little tiny clicks. Also, it's very bright as well because on the Ableton Live, in fact, let's do that. If we go to Mixer Effects, we can see it's not applied any effects at all. So really all we've got is MIDI clips and drum programs. That's all that's worked at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is, it's a bit disappointing, but let's see if we can not spend hours on this. I'm just going to do some stuff to see if we can get it sounding like it did to a degree on Ableton Live. So the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to get rid of these clicks, and we're going to put some effects on these drum programs to get them sounding like they did on Ableton Live. So we're going to go to, what are we going to go to? We're going to go to, I don't know what I'm doing, menu. Let's go to track edit. Right, okay. And envelopes. So this is, piano. Let me just turn that down a little bit more. I'll tell you why I'm doing this. My volume knob on the Force is not working properly, and I have to have it on max in order to get both channels. It has a channel imbalance if it's turned down, which is too much for my mixer. So let's try that again. So we've got those tiny little clicks and pops. So we're going to go to track edit and amp envelope. Then we're going to tap this thing here. And instead of adjusting each individual pad, which is what it's set on at the moment, we're going to tap all, and that allows us to change all of the pads at the same time. And I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of attack and a tiny little bit of release. And we've now got rid of those clicks, which is good. So let's do the same thing again for this one as well. Track edit, all still there. Envelope, amp envelope, a little bit of attack, no more clicks. Oh, there's a little bit there. That actually has got some noise in it anyway, like as a textural noise, so that might be what we're hearing there. Let's do the same on our drum chops. These were quite bad, I think. Okay, and same thing again, we're still on all. A little bit of attack and a little bit of release. Those are pretty clean now. So I just want to press play on the first scene and see what that sounds like. It's picked up the volumes. Let's go to the second track, second scene, see what that sounds like. So we're missing our two synths. So let's sort these drums out first. I'm going to solo the drums, and we're going to stick some effects on this. So I think first up is probably a compressor. So we're going to go down to air compressor. The init on this sounds awful. Go down to drums. Light and tight is pretty safe bet. Tighten them up a little bit, and let's put some air flavour. And what we want to do is make this sound a bit vinyl, kind of crackly sort of thing. Don't want the noise, but that sounds good. That's good. Let's leave that there. Sounds right. So if you remember, on the Ableton Live version of this, that chopped up piano sounded more like a guitar than a piano, and the main reason for that was I put a cab sim on that track. So I'm going to do the same thing now. If I can remember where that is. Oh, it's the top one, amp sim. So let's solo that. And it was like a Fender clean lead type thing I had on the other one. Okay, I went off air for a second there because it was taking me too long to find a decent sound. So basically what I've plumped for is the amp sim bright jangle, and I've turned the drive down a bit, taken all of the bass out of it and turned up the soft clip and top boost. And then I've put a 16th note delay on it. It's starting to sound a little bit more like that distracted on the Ableton Live. It just needs a little bit more of the bottom end taken out. So we're going to go to a parametric EQ and just put a low shelf on it. That's more like it was on the Ableton Live file. So next thing we need to do is see if we can find what I could do if I was doing this, even though I shouldn't have to. I could go back onto Ableton Live and see which patches that I used in Akai Force so that we can kind of recreate these two pads, but I can't be bothered to do that, and I shouldn't have to. So I'm just going to pick two Op4X patches to sit on those two tracks, and what I'm going to do is create two new plugin tracks, then copy the MIDI clips over. So I'll probably go off screen and do that bit as well and then come back. Okay, I've done that. I found two OpX for patches that sound similar. They might be the same ones, I can't remember. So if we have a quick look, we've got one is Tron and the other one is Crystal Strings. And if you remember when it was on Ableton Live, we had those two tracks in a group. Can't do that on the Force, so I've routed these two to a submix, the same submix, which basically does the same thing as putting them in a group on Ableton Live. And if we have a look at that submix, I've put some EQ, just taking out a little bit of the top end, and Flavor Pro just to add a little bit of grit and distortion, which is what we had on there on Ableton Live. So the other thing is we need to add some bass here. And this is the thing, I am totally prepared to be told I'm an idiot and I haven't done this right. But it's loaded all of these synths with the MIDI clips in onto MIDI tracks, which is fine if you're using external gear. But how do I, if there's a way of changing a track from one sort of track to another, I don't know. Because what I'd like to be able to do is just tap on that or press edit and bass and turn this, can we do that there? No, we can't. And turn it into a plugin track. I don't think you can. So I've got to create another track, put the plugin on it, and then copy the clips over manually, which is a bit annoying, to be honest. So again, I'm going to go off camera and do that and find a little bass patch to see if it sounds kind of similar. So I'll do that and I'll be back. Okay, done that. I found a tube synth instance, which sounds kind of similar. This is what it sounds like. Bring that envelope down a bit. That sounds pretty similar to what I had before. To be honest, I was trying to make a 303 on the on Ableton Live and I failed miserably in it, but I like the way it sounds and this sounds quite similar. So the next thing we need to do is the Pigments track, which was the sort of drone-y kind of pad. That should be quite easy to kind of replicate on Hype Synth. So I'm going to do that now and come back again. Right, so I found a Hype Synth preset to take the place of our Cheerio Pigments on the Ableton Live arrangement. I don't think they sound particularly similar, but they fulfill the same function. So I wanted something that was quite floaty, that would sort of drift through the middle of the arrangement, and this works, even if it doesn't sound quite the same, and it's called Space Flight. So our sample-based tracks are all working now, and we've applied effects to them to try and replicate what is on Ableton Live. And our synthesizer tracks are populated with sounds now, and have also been tweaked slightly to try and get this whole thing sounding the same as it did on Ableton Live. So what I'm going to do is play it through now, just the 4 scenes, and then I'll grab a clip from the Ableton Live version. We can just have a quick sort of comparison of them and see how close these are or how close they sound. And then we'll sum up on what this process was like, what we like about it, and what we'd like Akai to fix down the track. So this is what this sounds like now. So we've got the bass coming now. Sounds all right. I don't think it sounds as good as the Ableton Live, but to give Force the benefit of the doubt, I've spent way less time tweaking these sort of sounds that I had to add than I have been working on that on Ableton Live. So it's not a like for like comparison. Be interesting to see what people say in the comments about those two clips together. So in terms of does this work or is it usable, I've got to be honest, for me, I will probably never use this again, because for me, Force is Force, and it's what I like to use it for is performing on, and I like the limitations, or I like the the directions and limitations that Force has pushes me to. It makes me think about sampling a lot more. I think about resampling a lot and manipulating sort of sounds outside of synthesizers. I do a lot of kind of sampling and chopping on Force, and I like performing on it. So that's what it is for me. On Ableton Live, what I like about that is the fact that I've got pigments and all of the native instruments, sounds, and some really amazing effects. So that for me is about sound design and spending loads of time getting things to sound exactly what as you want. And then doing that, the only way you could do that is to sample all of your tracks. And I don't. And if you're playing the kind of performance I like to do, where you're actually sort of playing and triggering and mixing, that doesn't really work. However, if you're doing a DJ sort of set where you're playing stems, maybe that's more appropriate. However, I would be more likely to use this if it picked up the fact that some of these tracks on the were made on Force native plugins. Why it hasn't sort of figured out that those are Air OpX 4 tracks, I don't know. To be honest with you, it might be that I've done something wrong, and if I have and it should be doing that, please let me know and I'll have another go at doing this. But I would have been more likely to buy Mini D and things like that if I could use them on Ableton Live and then transfer sort of synths and sample tracks over to the Force, and it just worked. It was all there as I'd used it, and all I had to do was add some effects and things like that to get it sounding the same. As I say, I may have made a mistake there. That might be my fault. If it's not my fault, they need to make that work. That's sort of critical for me, really. The thing with the clicks at the beginning of samples, that doesn't bother me too much. If Akai introduced a similar function where it put a fade on automatically on the end, I'd imagine just as many people would complain about the fact it had done it as complain about it doesn't do it now. It's very easy just to hit that all button and just put a little attack and release on there. I don't see that as a problem. But yeah, for me, really, it is the fact that those Air plugins haven't sort of translated across. It's pretty easy to replicate groups with submixes. That's fine. The samples transferred over pretty fine. There was no problem with that at all. So it really is just the synths for me. If they fix that, I might end up using it a bit more often. But as a process goes, it opened the project perfectly fine. There were no issues there. I know people have had problems with it couldn't find samples. I didn't have any issue with that. It found it all straight away. That version of Ableton Live I'm using is 11 Suite, and Force is on its most recent firmware. Can't remember what number that is. But aside from that, it was all right. I think the only way I would use this functionality really is for samples. So if I spent some time making some really nice kits, but because the effects don't transfer over, you would need to resample all of your effects in Ableton Live using whatever plugins and stuff that you've got to bake those sounds into the drums before you brought them over to the Force. Otherwise, it won't sound quite the same. So for me, it's halfway there. It's kind of all right. Certainly, if you're using outboard sort of hardware synths, the fact that it translates your synth patches or synth tracks from Ableton just into MIDI tracks is perhaps less annoying because that's what you would want to use anyway. So I don't know. I think it's imperfect. And it's not something I will feel sort of particularly sort of drawn to use again. Anyway, as ever, thanks very much for watching. I hope that was useful, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers, bye.